We are live. All right, John. Exactly. We apologize for a couple of AV problems here. They say technology is easy, but audio visual is the tough stuff. So.
I showed up late. Matt's just covering.
That's it. I've been here now for
Matt's blaming the tech.
There you go. Rob unfortunately couldn't make it today as well. He's on a customer escalation, but I'm excited to have you here, John. We're going to go through some stuff. I think some exciting opportunities that we solved in 2023 here in the channel, and want to talk about some of the things we're doing on cloud. Maybe open some eyes to some things that we do. So
I'm excited. We kind of started this journey, and meaning you and Rob and the whole our great channel team in 2016. Really,
yeah, it's been a while.
We kind of got known as the cookie cutter, Cisco in the channel, SD-WAN, complex engineering, but the platform's kind of being boxable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're a whole lot more. And I think in 2023, we really were able to branch out into the channel with some great engineering teams from our TSDs and trusted advisors, and really get into the fun stuff. So it was a great 23. I'm excited for
That's
24.
what I want to go through. Absolutely. I think we've got a couple slides here. We wanted to have you kind of give us an overview of what you're seeing out there, kind of this migration to the cloud and what you've been seeing over the course of the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, so the first concept is why cloud, right? There's an ambiguous definition of what it is. There's some purpose-built clouds. You might get into your Oracles or your IBMs. Some folks are doing some stuff with GCP or Google. Really, at CBTS, we focused on the two big players, which is AWS and Microsoft Azure. Why are organizations moving that way? Well, the short answer on Microsoft is they don't necessarily have a choice, right? Microsoft is kind of bullying and pushing some people into the public hyperscaler. But in general, when I talk with organizations, I talk with customers, when you build out your infrastructure, you build out your data center, you're basically making a bet for 3, 5, 7 years. What's your infrastructure refresh life cycle in any organization? Ideally 3 years, probably more 5 or 7. Think about how much your business has changed.
Which was fine 10 years ago.
Sure.
But today, so quickly. They're moving so quickly. People are working from so many locations. That's a problem. It's a paradigm shift.
Even just bandwidth, right?
Yep.
All of a sudden, a firewall in your data center that had 1 gig of throughput 3 years ago is a dinosaur today, right? Yep. And so that's the first challenge is legacy infrastructure. I had to make a bet on where I was at today, and I had to guess where I'd be in 3 or 5 years. And I had to overspend to try to give me room for growth, and then I'd probably get it wrong anyway, right? So the first thing is I wanted to get rid of that. I wanted elastic services. So organizations are moving to the cloud for things that need to be on demand, not necessarily always on. The second is the distributed architecture, to your point. People are working from anywhere. They're living anywhere. Applications can live anywhere. So why tie these things back to our data center? So more and more organizations have agreed we're going to the cloud. And 5 years ago, that meant cloud first.
That's why I've heard you do this before about the idea of cloud first versus cloud smart.
That's where we're at today, right? It's cloud smart. It was cloud first. Put it in the cloud. And then all of a sudden people started to get their cloud bills. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. So yes, there was this advantage of elasticity on when I need it, passing some of that, mitigating that risk and passing it to somebody else. Microsoft is going to I trust that they're going to keep the data center secure more so than I would need to. Obviously, I still have responsibility of securing those workloads, but by and large, I mitigated a lot of risk by going to these players, but I had a lot of cost. And so we've really started to see organizations start to move into cloud smart. What makes sense for me where?
Even moving loads that had moved to AWS or Azure back into IaaS possibly, right?
That's right. Or hardware data center. So the first concept is it elastic? Do I need this to be able to scale and grow on demand? Think about an e-commerce platform. That's going to need to be scalable, right? That makes a lot of sense. However, what about things like domain services that are static and don't need to be moved or anything like that, right? Those are all very different things that we need to worry about and think about. So we've seen a lot of our customers, we go to market with 3 different platforms, right? We have the public hyperscalers. Mm-hmm. We offer our own public cloud. And so I still need the same elasticity. I still need those same capabilities. However, I don't need, thank you.
There you go.
I don't need it to be as geographically globally distributed, right, as a Microsoft. So that's our infrastructure as a service pod that can be public.
And we've got one of those examples we're going to go through. Yep.
We also have private. So there are customers who say, I need PCI compliance. That's why I don't want to go to the hyperscalers. I need control. I need access. I want dedicated hardware. I don't want to be in a shared tenant. In the hyperscalers, right, we talk about like GCC Hive with Microsoft, some of these dedicated Azure platforms. We can do the same in ours. But really where I think CBTS and where we've had a lot of success in 23, especially channel-led, is this hybrid environment. Utilizing, maybe it's CBTS's public cloud, maybe it's our private cloud, in conjunction with AWS, in conjunction with Microsoft, and really understanding where an application needs to live. Where should it live? Should it live in the cloud? Should it be moved to serverless? Should it be, at the edge? The next frontier where we're going to really see things going in 2024 is the idea of edge compute stack, which is the concept of, multi-branches, turning that branch into a distributed architecture.
That's one of the big moves that VMware's, right, has been moving on, is this idea that more and more activity is happening at the location.
Yeah.
More IoT activity, more data analytics, and what is the idea of actually moving some of that compute back to a location or even near edge in service providers?
Right. So we tend to think about it in a couple of ways, right? What needs to be elastic, like I already said. I think of e-commerce, I use the example, think of pay-per-view, right? If you had the big UFC fight on or something like that, if you're hosting that, you're not going to pay for the servers of what that peak would be, right? We just had the big game in the NFL, right? And it was the highest since the moon landing. I think they said it was the highest watched event on TV. And I saw a funny thing that said, and they both happened in Las Vegas.
There you go. There you go.
But you don't want to build for that permanently. You want to pay for it when you need it. That's where the cloud is at. The second becomes what can be centralized. I've got a 400 site retail customer. Do I need to build this 400 times, or can I centralize it? It's not elastic, so it doesn't need to be in the cloud, but it could be in my data center. Mm-hmm. And then it's what either A, for very low latency, needs to be at the branch, or just what do I want to keep up and running? So retail is a great example of things like point of sale. How do I continue to, if the internet's down, I still want to be able to take, because I'm not going to put dedicated internet circuits at every single site. You mentioned IoT. Wi-Fi 7 is the new frontier, and the big use case around Wi-Fi 7 is really targeting retail, and the idea of like holograms and very ultra high bandwidth, ultra low latency, getting ready for the true Internet of Things to come.
It's interesting to see this cycle really of everything was centralized in data centers 15 years ago. We then start moving to client server architectures, moving to the cloud, and now we're starting to see the actual compute and the data driving it. Some of this stuff has to go back to the location.
Yeah, I mean, that's our industry, right? We'll be sitting here in 15 years. Well, maybe you'll be retired in 15 years, but we'll be sitting here having the same conversation around why you should take 100% of your workloads to the cloud. The other component of the cloud that I think is important to hit on as one of the values that we bring with our clients. So I mentioned this: should it be in the cloud? Should it be in the data center? Should it be in an edge compute stack? Helping you kind of plan that, migrate it. Do apps need to be modernized? But the other component of that is serverless compute. And we see that quite a bit. What needs to be built on a server versus functions or Lambdas? I always use the example, there's a retailer, and their whole point is, first off, we're across every time zone in the US. So, at 10 a.m., 1/4 of my stores are open. 75% aren't. And then the same, it starts to be true on the backside of it. But they're open at 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. And their whole point is that's 16 hours a day. There's no point of sale activity. And that's at best, right? Realistically, with time zones, there's 12 hours a day that there's no activity, or 20 hours a day, no activity. And so they built out their point of sale as a function, as serverless computing. Sure. And so they pay some, 0.000007 cents every time they scan a transaction through a point of sale. That's kind of another benefit of the cloud. So I look at, can it be built as serverless? Can it be, does it need to be elastic? Does it make sense to pay the growing cost of cloud versus something that is static, like domain services that can be centralized? Or are we building an edge compute stack anyway? What needs to be survivable in the event that we lost?
And I think that's one of the values really that you and your team have brought to channel, and some of the opportunities we've done in 2023 is this kind of consulting, because it is about understanding where the applications today, where are they today, where are they going tomorrow, where they're going to go even in the distant future. And I think we've got some good use cases we could talk about here.
Yeah.
Well, the first one, I don't know if we've got a slide. If Lance, I know you're running the deck here. Yeah, if you go to that next slide. This was one that I know you were heavily involved with, which was a nationwide kind of nutritional supplement company, retail facing. And when we got to them, my understanding is they had quite a few challenges, running some like 200 workloads in their own data center, a data center that was really starting to fall down, like leaking when it rained.
Yep.
But it was more than that. It's more than kind of solving the data center problem, but also taking a look at where applications were going to go in the future. So talk a little bit about what you guys did with this group.
Yeah, what I love about these use cases here that we're sharing today is these are all channel-led, right? So CBTS, we've been doing this since 2000, 2001 with some enterprise customers, some really complex things. And I mentioned we kind of in the channel went in with more networking and voice. It's kind of how we were known.
How we first came in, absolutely.
And I mentioned we had a great year last year. We're excited to keep it going. Really new revenue streams getting into new parts of an organization. And this is one that a partner, a trusted advisor brought us into. And it was the weirdest thing. Their data centers in the lobby of their building, first floor.
I had not heard that.
Oh, yeah. It's like the reception desk and then this glass data center. And it was on the first floor. And every time it rained, it leaked. But there was like 3 floors above it. I just still, to this day, don't know the answer to how that happened. But they had a lot of aged infrastructure, a lot of aged hardware. So they had to get out immediately. They were built on a VMware platform in this data center. They had a lot of things that were end of life, hardware-wise. They had versions that were end of support from dot releases. They had to get out. Also, long-term, they had a strategy that they did want to move to the cloud. So they had a lot of e-commerce platform, things that should be in the cloud, needed to be elastic, but they were legacy x86 applications. So with that, it brings 2 main things. The first is application dependency. I can put this in the cloud, but it's dependent on this database, a DB2 database that isn't able to move to the cloud. How's that application going to run? What's the end user experience? And then is, again, back to cost effective. Should it run in the cloud? I can put bare metal in the cloud, AVS, VMC on AWS. There are platforms that I can put Nutanix and VMware and just run it in the cloud and pay for both.
But the units are incredibly expensive.
Incredibly expensive because I'm paying for the bare metal plus the cloud. And so what was great about them, we were able, so our IaaS is also built on VMware. We were able to vMotion all their workloads. Obviously, we did it responsibly, did some testing, did some networking, but it was some 6 weeks that we moved all these workloads. I mean,
it
was
was 200 workloads in 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
I was not aware of that.
It was a very fast move to get them out of their data center and get them onto ours. We built this as a hybrid. So they said, hey, we have a lot. They had some stuff to JP Morgan for like credit card processing that had to be dedicated hardware. They had some PCI stuff. They hosted their own e-commerce platform. But as far as the front door, the transit to get in, that didn't need to be dedicated firewalls and routers. That can be virtualized with VLANs and VDOMs. And so we were able to build a cost model that made sense for them. We used public cloud for networking and the front door to get into our IaaS. And then from there, it was private cloud, their dedicated hardware behind it. And then what was my favorite part of it is they have this 3 and 5 year roadmap. We'll talk a little bit on one of our other use cases here about the benefit of us managing a cloud environment for a customer. But for them, they said, we want to get to AWS. We want to get to Azure over the next 3 to 5 years. And we actually built an agreement that said, here's the
And they said they want to get there, but they don't know how exactly.
They have no clue.
Yeah.
Right. They don't. They just knew they had to get out of their data center. They had to go to the cloud. What did that mean? How did they do it? So we wrote this agreement that said, here's your spend with CBTS. And that can be us managing it in Azure, in AWS, or our IaaS. We don't care. And then we built in 40 hours a week of DevOps. And so we actually helped build a CI/CD pipeline. We actually are running their applications through that pipeline. We are developing those applications where, as we identify where they should live, we are helping reform them, refactor them, rehost them into Azure, AWS. And so for them, they're getting this multi-cloud experience, but they're not having to pay the growing cost of these hyperscalers. If it's static, it just goes in their private cloud. If it's something that's customer facing, they want to be on open to the public internet, like a public internet app, that we're going to move out into AWS. If it's things that are tied to other Microsoft resources like O365, right, transit gateways, those we're going to put into Microsoft. So it was, we met their immediate need, which was, I have to get out of my data center. But with any other partner, I feel comfortable saying that, any other partner besides CBTS, they would have been locked into, okay, we've got to make a decision for the next 3 to 5 years because that's what the colo's contract is, or that's, what the hosting provider's contract is. They would have had to make a, a decision in a very short term that was not right for the long term.
Well, that's one of the things we're going to talk about later on too, and the channel started to hear this message that we give out is this idea of multi-tool. You've seen us do the slide of multi-tool, right? And that we are more than simply the managed services that these partners have known us for originally. And that was what was so impressive about this opportunity to me, is that it was going into an area that this particular partner who brought us, the business had no idea we had this depth. We showed that depth to the customer. Now we've given them really the assistance to even take and modernize their applications and move to different environments. And if I understand correctly too, you also kind of fixed a patching, or not a patching, but a DR and backup problem for them as well as part of this whole thing.
Well, yeah, when we do managed cloud, right, you're in our IaaS environment, we're managing those workloads, we're managing those servers, we become responsible for the patching of that OS. We become responsible for DR. We do once a year, we do a DR test with a letter of attestation that's included at no cost. We can do more, if you at a PS engagement.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when we manage your workloads, we manage your workloads, right? It's not just day two support, moves, adds, and changes. And what's awesome for this particular customer in the channel, as I mentioned, they're very business to consumer e-commerce focused. I think they had a total of their headquarters and then, 3 or 4 branch like satellite offices. So 6 years ago, that would have been, a 6-site NAS deal,
Yep.
a 6-site SD-WAN deal,
Yep.
maybe some UCaaS. This was a chance for CBTS with a trusted advisor. It's north of $80,000 a month in monthly reoccurring revenue, right? And so
they got up to billing in something like 3 or 4 months.
Oh, yeah. Well, we took the workloads in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So from signature to first bill was about 8 weeks total time. And north of $80,000 a month. So there wasn't ordering circuits and waiting for circuits to land and then getting hardware and doing drop ship and installing 2 sites a day. I mean, this was getting up and running in under 2 months at $80,000 a month, and things that typically in the channel CBTS wasn't getting opportunities. This was exciting.
So let's go to another one, because the channel has started to get to know us for retail, right?
Yep.
And that oftentimes was like we do, like the 3rd largest pizza organization, some 3,000 locations where we deliver our Meraki stack of the edge and Ethernet switches and our phones. So in the channel, we were known for doing a lot of locations and retail, but oftentimes we had to bring our own equipment in.
Yep.
We were selling them our managed devices. This next one that we're talking about here it's like a 900 location, I think, a chicken restaurant that people would know about. But that was none of our gear. So we came in and tried to identify what the business outcomes they were looking for. So talk a little bit about how we came in and had this successful win delivering a custom managed service that sometimes, again, in the channel, people don't know we can do these kinds of things.
Yeah. So to your point, most of the time in the retail space, especially with food, franchise is involved, right? And so you have corporate that can't necessarily dictate what the franchises do, but they also want standardization. So great, our network as a service, it's a fixed operating expense and it's predictable and everybody's happy, right? Franchises get a new stack at a low monthly cost, corporate gets standardization. Those projects you mentioned, the pizza chain, we're still, I think, 50, 60 sites a month installing, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it
grows every month
because of it's the franchise approach, right? There are long lead times to get up to running on billing. It's a lot of project management. It's a lot of work. And by the time you get done rolling it out, it's time to go and refresh. There's a lot of other retail customers, or any industry for that matter, where they don't have franchises. They've got a capital budget. They own all their own locations. They want standardization. They've already bought standardization. What they're looking for is the ability to grow, right? Exactly that. This particular customer, we talked to them about, their network team has been the same headcount. It's a great organization. Everyone's been there 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Culture's phenomenal. It's the same network team as when they had like 30 locations. Now they've got 800. In a lot of the chain, they're going into new time zones, and that's creating all these issues. We were able to be an extension of that team, allow them to focus on the things that matter to them, right? Through our conversation with them, you mentioned this chicken place. So we said, well, this is how we'll do it. And when an event happens, we'll reach out to the store. And they said, no. I want my employees in the store making chicken. That's what my employees do. I want to focus on making chicken. So it was a great story. Again, we're able to get to billing very, very quickly.
talk about the technology stack, because again, the partners out there might not know. We came in.
Sure.
These are pieces that we have not typically been in our NAS portfolio.
Sure. Yes, this is an internet circuit and an LTE into a Cradlepoint router, Fortinet switches, Fortinet APs,
Yep.
right? And so we're layering in our Logic Monitor as a unified standard monitoring platform for them. We're also then plugging in, we're monitoring the internet circuits, handling moves as changes of the Cradlepoint, the Forti APs and the Forti switches, and then also field services and truck rolls. And
that was a big part for them, right? They wanted smart hands. That the moment that they saw a problem, it was difficult for them to get a truck roll to replace a piece of gear, whatever those problems were.
Yeah, and they wanted an all-in solution that allowed them to focus on their business and be an easy button. So we were able to bring that to the table. There's also, they made a comment through the onboarding, and they said, "This is the way we do it. If there's a better way to do it, let us know. We all know our network. 1,000 customer networks." And so they got the expertise, not just giving them back their nights and weekends, but the expertise of, is it optimized? Is it being done the right way? And what's exciting is, had we led that conversation with, we've got this NAS offering built on Meraki and Juniper, they're a great offer.
It wasn't going to go anywhere.
We weren't never, they would have said,
whether it was us, whether somebody else coming in and selling a Fortinet stack or HP, doesn't make a difference. They weren't interested in buying a new stack. They wanted somebody to come in and build a custom monitoring and manage program for them.
They weren't trying to solve the headache of disparate technology. They weren't trying to solve the headache of what the single pane of glass, and none of that was a headache for them. It was simply the amount of people. And at one point they made the comment of, I could go and hire more people on my team. I don't want to deal with the interview process. And then they leave the company and I've got to deal with a new interview process and benefits, and make it simple for me. And so this is really exciting because, to your point, it is technology stacks. We don't do Cradlepoint as a service or Fortinet certain managed services. We'll take on, basically any enterprise class, right? I always say if you can buy it at Micro Center, we probably don't do it. But business class, enterprise class technologies, we can take on, we can onboard, ingest very quickly, and again, get to billing revenue north of $90,000 a month. That's onboarding with ServiceNow, with Logic Monitor, call it a couple of sites that you could ingest, test, tweak alarms, and then you hit a button and you take it all.
Wasn't part of it as well some staff aug and placement of some professional services to help them? Wasn't that part of the opportunity too?
Yes. So we were staffing too. So the concept of, hey, we need help, but we know it's going to take some 6 months to onboard. So we said, well, we can give you help today. And so we used our staff aug team to put a person in place immediately
to help them with this transition to us.
And that person's now on our managed services team.
As soon as they're done, going to move to our managed services group.
Yeah. And now we're also doing some Windows database staffing stuff unrelated to this. But they said, hey, here's some other needs. And, so it was managed services that was the first, prong of the multi-tool. But yeah, staff augmentation added some immediate relief, immediate pain points.
Now, I know this is not on the slide here, and I know you're working the opportunity right now, but I thought I'd bring it up. We're also dealing with an energy company that's got 170 locations. It's Palos at the edge, but then like a highly survivable Ethernet stack. To describe a little bit of that, because that's another, again, custom managed service we're putting together. We're not selling any new equipment. We're coming in and solving a problem with custom managed services.
Yeah, and so what's unique there too, they've got a bandwidth aggregator today that's not us. So this aggregator is going to bring in a circuit. They're going to bring in an LTE. That's going to come into a Cradlepoint router. Behind the Cradlepoint router, there's a Cisco switch, and then HA Palo Alto firewalls, and then another Cisco switch, and then UPSs. And we built this kind of custom experience. So we've got knowledge base articles and handling notes. We'll work with that bandwidth aggregator, right? So when we see an issue, rather than telling the customer we see an issue and it's not your hardware, we're going to proactively reach out to the bandwidth aggregator. Also, as part of it, they came to us and said, we know our network today is built kind of one site at a time. It's statically routed. It's not optimized. As you guys take this on into your managed services, can you optimize this? We'd love to put in BGP. We'd love to make sure we're doing things correctly. And so we're actually kicking off right now a billable engagement, a professional services engagement, where our architects are optimizing their network, and then we're going to ingest it into our managed services. And we know we're taking on a network that's in great shape, right? Rather than being built one trouble ticket at a time.
I think that's, again, one of the key messages we can kind of leave people with anything today at all. It's this idea of the fact that CBTS is this multi-tool that has the ability to go kind of deep and wide in professional managed services. PS engagements to help solve problems, staff aug, these kinds of things that the channel didn't know about this, from us in 2022, started to learn in 23. And that's one of the big messages we want to get out this year.
Well, and I think part of that, Matt, is, we kind of get conditioned in the channel to say, well, how much does it cost? Well, this is a challenge, right? It depends. I've got to do this custom stuff. I can't make it as quote unquote rate cardable. And so I think that was some of the concern. And we started at the end of 22, beginning of 23, kind of doing a controlled launch. You and I were all for it. Mesmer wasn't. He was concerned. He was a worry ward.
We got him along.
But we dipped our toe in. And what has, and probably shouldn't have surprised me, but how up to the task, up to the challenge, the engineering capability of our trusted advisors, how quickly, when they're like, no, we totally understand. We get why you can't.
And we're starting to see more opportunities this quarter than we did the previous quarter. It's starting to really grow.
And they're very well qualified. They understand the value. So I think.
And that's part of the channel. Actually, that's part of the message we've had in CBTS and our channel too, is that kind of showing folks, when we first came in, we would take a 20-seat UCaaS deal. It was anything for MRR, right? But as we've matured in the channel, as the messaging's matured in the channel, we're starting to work more with those kinds of partners for companies typically in the 500 employees and above. And that's really where we're starting to say, hey, listen, you got 500 employees and above, you got multi-locations. These are the kinds of things that we can start to bring in your team or other teams in CBTS for.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about one last one here. And this was an opportunity that had a lot to do with Microsoft licensing and Azure consumption, things like that. Maybe in the channel, people don't realize that there's even opportunities, billable opportunities for Azure consumption or licensing. It's not the same as some of these other managed services, but again, if we can help somebody come in, solve a problem in their kind of mid to enterprise customer, then we can kind of help come in, kind of get that first toehold, and then maybe go wider where appropriate. But talk a little bit about this opportunity.
Yeah. So, a couple of things. The first is around licensing. Your customer can have an EA, which a lot of people do in the Microsoft world, and then come to find out it's great at the onset of buying. It's maybe harder to grow with it, add on to it. There's maybe some constraints. So I have a lot of customers who say, we don't want an EA any longer. There's two different other.
And the reason for that is why then? Because
you
if
lose
I go
flexibility.
back to CSP, I can optimize better across.
Right. I can grow in more increments of one, or I can add this product alone without having it be tied to
pay for the. Okay.
Right. I don't need every user to be the same right across the board. There's just more flexibility in a CSP model. So if I'm not in an EA, I can buy it as an individual, right? I put my credit card in, or I link my bank account, and it's just true consumption through Azure, or I can go through a CSP, a cloud service provider. And what's great about CSP,
which we are,
CBTS is a CSP. You can have multiple CSPs. So maybe you're partnered with somebody for Microsoft Voice. You can have a CSP for that and a CSP for Azure. Now, we would love to be your CSP for everything. But again, that's not the same. In an EA world, there's like 6 companies in the whole world that can sell EAs, what they call LSPs. So it's kind of controlled. EA is not as everybody's in love with it as maybe they were in the past. So the first is licensing. When I am your CSP, I have responsibility for that first call for support. One, we tend to be a lower cost than like a Microsoft premium support that you have to add on. 2, what I hear from our customers is we're more responsive. We have an 8-hour response SLA. I don't know of a customer that's ever gotten a reply back in under 24 when they go through Premier support. So the first thing, when you talk with your customers, they're going to have Microsoft. We know that. What are they doing for licensing today? Are they on an EA? Is it the right fit? And by the way, if you don't know, we can do these audits to find out, is it the right licensing model? Can we optimize that? So this is a customer was looking for a Microsoft CSP, needed all the O365 for the end users. And again, that concept of having CBTS as my first call. It's cheaper than premium support, and I'm getting way better, way faster support. And then
with a support team and an organization that's got broader knowledge across a group of other technologies. And so there's a lot more value there than just dealing straight with the premier support team at Microsoft.
Correct. And then we still have Microsoft behind us, right? Like that's our escalation point for tier 4. So rather than waiting 24 hours, 48 hours to have tier one reach out to you, you're getting CBTS within 8 hours, troubleshooting the problem, working the problem. And if we can't resolve, we're going to Microsoft with these great case notes and getting to their elevated support. So that's the first thing. With O365, buy it through us as a CSP. We're going to give you a better support model. Then also, we can do Azure through this. And so for this customer, they said, we want to bring all of our licensing to you. Well, with Azure, it's also not as simple as, you're going to have some consumption billing. There are some things that are going to be elastic. It's not just the licensing. So having a CSP who has the ability to bill you those fluctuations as they go up, as they go down, that will write some of those flexibilities into the agreement. Everybody will let you scale up. Not everybody will let you scale down.
No, I wasn't aware that we can help with that. Even this,
we can write some flexible agreements around consumption.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean there might be some minimums depending on what we have to put in place on our side, right? What's the investment we make for certain things and time, people, energy. But yeah, we can write these flexible consumption agreements. And then everybody says, well, when I go to the cloud, I'm in the cloud. Hey, you still have to manage that, right? And so we see a lot of organizations, and this is a great example, where they said, well, I don't just want somebody to migrate me to Azure, because once it gets there, if I don't know Azure well enough today, I'm not going to know it tomorrow. I think there's like 30 new SKUs a week or something Microsoft comes out with. This thing moves so fast. And so this was us being able to sell their licenses, optimize their licenses, audit their licenses, and then manage those workloads as an MRC when they're in Azure. So rather than it just being a CSP who says, yeah, I sold them their licensing, we're also now managing.
So what does that mean? Because again, I'm not as familiar with Azure and that kind of, what does it mean to help manage an Azure workload? What are some of the business problems or challenges we help solve there?
So the first thing is typically plumbing and networking. It's not as simple. So it's no different than managing a workload in a data center.
Okay.
Right? We've been doing this
making
for a while.
sure that regions talk to one another, that even a particular region is talking back to my SD-WAN cloud or back to my data center. That's the first thing, is managing networking.
Networking,
okay.
Managing security.
Yeah.
Right. Putting it up in the cloud doesn't mean it should be able to talk to everything else inside of the tenant, and making sure we have a good dev environment and prod environment, and those, separation of church
and state. Is that
and
part of our consulting too, is helping people understand what ought to be dev and what ought to be production, these kinds of things? Okay.
Yep. Helping build, design those tenants, migrate to those tenants, and then manage those tenants. Governance is another big component of it. Who can stand up a workload? What role in your organization? How much money can they spend before how long can a workload stay vacant, right? I'm sure you get the emails from us internally. Matt, you stood up this SharePoint site or this Microsoft Teams site, and it has had no activity in 30 days. Do you want to renew it for 30 days?
Yep.
If you don't respond, we're going to delete it, right? That's governance. That's all part of it. There's the patching of the workload, right? A lot of the challenges you have in your data center still exist. We're moving the platform from a colo to Microsoft Azure. Doesn't mean we're removing all of the headaches. And another piece of that is DR and backup, right? And that's, for this particular customer, was another huge component. Just like inspect what you expect, we get a lot. Azure Site Recovery is a great platform. It's a great product. But what are you trying to protect against? So I've moved all my workloads into Azure. I'm using ASR, targeting Azure.
More Azure resources.
Right. And so what happens when the issue is Azure, right? As opposed to using our infrastructure as a service, so we can actually take these workloads out of Azure. We use Zerto. That's the tool that we use for our DR platform. And we're going to be targeting dedicated resources in our data centers. So we can do IBM resources, dedicated LPARs in our data centers. We can do the VM environment, Nutanix environments. And so kind of
again, consulting then, what's your risk tolerance? What's it mean to you to be down for an hour or 4 hours? God forbid, should Azure go out that long, we can help consult on those kinds of things.
And do you need everything, right? So applications in that world, we talk about tier 1, 2, 3, and 4 apps. And those tiers tie with it, different RTOs and RPOs, 15-minute, 30-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour.
How important the application is.
And so understanding that environment, you don't want to pay for everything. And so we really, for this customer, what started as, through a trusted advisor, hey, can you sell me some Microsoft licensing? That's the ask. I need Microsoft licensing. Became a full CSP for O365 and Azure, migration to Azure, and then ongoing management of the workloads in Azure for, again, some $80,000+ a month in monthly reoccurring. So what was a sell me some licensing became $80K a month in monthly reoccurring charges.
Yep, that's fantastic. Which, by the way, I owe you like $20 for that. That's a great segue to the last slide, right? Lance, go ahead and throw the last slide up if you would. Up one more. Keep going. There you go. All right. So this idea of multi-tool, we have been using this. In fact, anybody who'd like to have a multi-tool, send us an email. We'd be happy to send you one. We've been introducing this concept of the fact that we now can be known for your largest customers with a lot of solutions, right? The idea that, you may come in, you mentioned we first came in with this customer with CSP, and so we opened that multi-tool up and, the knife worked just fine for that particular problem. And now we start talking to them, and now we need a screwdriver, or now we need a pair of pliers. And the idea that we have the ability to help partners out there get to cash quicker, quote to cash even, right? We want to come into an opportunity, and if we're the right, right customer, the right partner to come in, vendor to come in with that particular customer, help them solve that first problem, we've got a whole wide variety of solutions to be able to continue that experience with the partner, to continue that experience with the customer. Because I think, again, you see kind of on the right side of the slide that we were known first as a group of kind of, prescribed managed services. And now we've been expanding to a whole group of custom managed services. You talked about Staff Aug here. We talked about specific professional services to do network analysis, all the kind of cloud consulting we're doing. So I think that, I want to leave the group here with one thought, really, is this idea that we now have a wide breadth of services that for your customers, 500 employees and above, we'd love to help you come in, solve that business outcome, and see how we grow more with the customer. So,
and Matt, one of the things as we go through these engagements, right, we talked about all these different things. I am running into customers who just get vendor fatigue.
That's a great concept. I'm glad you brought it up.
It's I've got to go to this person. I buy this through them, and I buy this through them, and then these people do this, and these people do that. And it's how do we consolidate? How do we consolidate somebody that really is looking at? So while we're a multi-tool for the trusted advisors and all these different areas, we also, instead of point solutions for customers where they're going, I'll buy this from you, we're looking at that whole landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only a multi-tool to help our customers and our trusted advisors as far as one place to go, it's being able to see that whole vision and how it all ties together. That vendor fatigue is very real.
Yep. You're going to channel partners with us, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So love to have anybody come by the cabanas, sit and talk with you. As you can see, John is a fabulous presenter. You've got a wealth of knowledge. You've just done an incredible job with CBTS, expanding kind of this product set, particularly in the channel with us. So we appreciate that.
I love it. It's fun.
Come by and see us at Channel Partners, and thanks for a successful Q1 update here.
Yeah, and thank you for a successful 2023 with these cloud offerings.
Yep, you got it.